Once artists figured out these conventions for creating the illusion of depth, some of them got really good at it. In this Daniel Sprick painting that's in the collection of the Denver Art Museum, you can see that he has achieved such a level of believability that he's actually going to be sneaking some things past us. He's following a lot of the same conventions. He's using atmospheric perspective. You can see the difference in the red of the carpet when it's close to us versus the red of the carpet when it's further away. He's using scale. The front edge of the board is larger than the back edge of the board. He's using overlapping. The string is in front of the board, in front of the pot, in front of the rug. We can also see him using vertical location. Things that are further back in this space are higher up. Things that are closer to us are lower down. He's using pretty much all of the conventions that we've talked about before, diagonals that go back in space as part of a linear perspective system. And yet, if we look closely at this painting, we can see that he's also trying to sneak some things past us. What exactly is holding up the roses? Nothing. He's got a plate separated from its shadow in a way that makes it look like it's floating. Because after he dazzles you with the believability of his image, he wants to then remind you that it's all fabricated. When we think about modern and contemporary art, there's actually a lot of art that will create a deliberate reminder of the false narrative that we're seeing. Artists will have interventions to let us know of the constructed nature of the work. They want us to think about the fact that it's put together so that we will analyze and consider what we're actually seeing. This is an idea that we can trace all the way back to Bertolt Brecht and his early 20th century theater theory, where we don't want the viewer to give us their willing suspension of disbelief and simply accept the images that we present. Instead, we hope to foster in the viewer a critical appraisal of what we're seeing. Kerry James Marshall, in this painting also in the Denver Art Museum's collection, is using some, but not all, of the conventions for creating the illusion of depth. We've got diagonals. We've got scale. The tree in the foreground is bigger than the tree in the background. We've got overlapping, but we can also see the way in which he is selectively undermining some of those. The overlapping of the boy in front of the girl hides the fact that her leg just disappears. We also have a number of conventions that he is sort of using, but also not using. While it is true that he's using vertical location, he's not using atmospheric perspective. When we look at the color of the building receding into the background, it doesn't really get much cooler. And it's hard to tell because he has collapsed the space, but we can see that this building ends, and the building that is further away is actually a warmer, stronger color, causing it to flatten out the space. The grass doesn't really change color. We have a sort of odd diagonal in that it feels like it's tilted up a little bit too much. You can see that in the way in which the hose seems to be shown as if we're looking straight down on it. And then we've got obvious interventions, the loose abstract way in which he's painting the flowers, the papers collaged on, and as if he really wants us to know the title, he's got a banderole, a medieval convention wherein you can label images with, in this case, the text, Better Homes, Better Gardens, the title of the painting. Kerry James Marshall wants us to see this space and to not entirely trust it. And we can see that clearly in the way in which he's using the skin tone of the figures. Black people, as it turns out, are not literally black. But what Kerry James Marshall has done is to paint them as if they are. In some of his work, he actually will draw the facial features in with white chalk so that there's this sort of ghostly appearance on top of the black skin tone. He's using color here almost symbolically. If we know some of the history of what he's depicting, we can understand why. Because what we have here is an indictment of separate and unequal. Wentworth Gardens is a housing project in Chicago. What we have then is an examination of the way in which African Americans might aspire to a typical middle-class life in Chicago, but it isn't available to them because of discriminatory housing policies such as redlining. In Illinois 2-8, the government registry serial number for Wentworth Gardens is an example of a housing project where your choices are limited and this is the best you can hope for. And while we all aspire to better homes and better gardens, we can see that there's something at work that doesn't seem to allow for us to achieve those goals. Kerry James Marshall wants you to know that this is put together. He wants you to actually feel a little bit uncomfortable. So we've got some of the conventions for creating the illusion of depth working, but he's going to frustrate others, especially in color, which makes sense given the color is the cause of the problem.